Hello, my name is Kathy Tompkins, and I am faculty in the social work department here at Mason, and I am also the Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Studies in our college, the College of Health and Human Services. So I'm going to talk to you just briefly today about my research and explain to you different methodologies that I use as a researcher, as well as give you an example of one particular research project that I'm very interested in and passionate about right now. As you can see from the slide behind me, I'm going to talk to you about a person-centered music intervention that myself and other faculty and students here in the Department of Social Work are currently working on as an example of what I do as a researcher. Before I get started on that though, I wanted just to give you a general overview of the content of my research and of the methodology that I use. So as you will learn as you continue on in our program here in the Social Work Department, that there are two general types of methodology with all kinds of strategies that you can use underneath those types. But the two general types of research methodologies are qualitative research and quantitative research. Though I was trained as a quantitative researcher, I received my both my MSW and PhD from the University of Maryland. And University of Maryland has a very strong quantitative research training for their doctoral students. So though I was trained as a quantitative researcher, I'm primarily a qualitative researcher currently. I do still do survey research. I'm very interested in survey research, and then I do a little dabbling in secondary data analysis, so meaning that samples with large N's, so with large participants in them, I either collect data from 100 or more people as a survey research methodologist, or I use existing data sets and I try to explore the relationships between some variables in those existing data sets to move my research agenda forward. So I still dabble in survey research at times, but primarily I go out there, I collect data from people who are living experiences that I'm very interested in studying. So that's my work as a qualitative methodologist. I'm very interested in hearing people's stories and then figuring out from their stories what themes emerge from those stories and really how we can build theoretical frameworks to help us understand that population and as well as the social problem that's affecting that population. So that is what I do as a qualitative research. In my content area, this is a general kind of umbrella, if you will, is caregiving. So I'm very interested in caregiving, primarily around older adults as caregivers. So kinship care, for example, a lot of grandparents and older aunts and uncles are raising either their grandchildren or nieces, nephews, folks who are not their biological children. So I'm very interested in kinship care as well as dementia care. So those are kind of two prongs of the caregiving content that I'm very interested in. So I'm going to talk to you just briefly about kinship care, and in that research I really do use the classic grounded theory methodology. So I'm going to talk to you about that, and then I'm going to give you an example of a music intervention that again myself and some colleagues here in the social work department as well as some fantastic students are continuing to work on, and that's utilizing primarily a qualitative methodology too. So I'm going to give you an example of a presentation we did last fall on that project. The presentation is a pilot study, and we are continuing now to move forward with that music intervention. So I'm going to talk to you more about that in a minute. But first, just a little bit about my kinship work. So my research question around kinship care currently is, will the grandchildren, so I'm primarily looking at grandparents and grandchildren. I just want to make sure that you understand that kinship care is much broader than that. It's not only about the grandparents caring for the grandchildren. It's about grandparents, aunts, uncles, older brothers and sisters caring for kids who are not biologically their own children. And the reasons for that, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the biological parents are unable to care for their children. My research, though, is really drills down to the grandparents and their roles with their grandchildren as primary caregivers. My research question is, at some point, will these grandchildren come back around and be the caregivers for their grandparents who have raised them, all through their developmental years? So if you know a little bit about the caregiving literature, right now, primarily, the caregivers out there, so the caregivers for older adults who may become frail and need caregiving, those caregivers are primarily adult daughters who then care for their moms when they become more dependent and frail. I mean, certainly there are more caregivers out there than the adult daughters, but they are generally the folks who care for older adults as they may need it as they grow older because of chronic illnesses or whatever the case may be. But if those adult daughters are absent for some reason, so sometimes kinship care results because people are incarcerated, have died for numerous reasons, or addicted to drugs, whatever the case may be. So if those adult daughters, who tend to be the primary caregivers for older adults, are out of the picture, will the grandchildren who the grandparents have been raising, will they come around and be the caregivers for the grandparents? So that's my big research question. In order really to figure that out, you really have to do a longitudinal study, which means you're following specific families over a period of time to look at the relationships as, when the grandparent first started caring for the grandchildren, and then following that family over the years to see if the grandparent needs care, if that grandchild will come back around and care for that grandparent as the primary caregiver. I have not been able to really secure funding, again, so I haven't talked much about this, but to do these longitudinal projects, really any kind of research project, if you're really going to, delve into the research question, you really need some type of external support. So external funding is always helpful. So I have not been able to secure the external support that I need to do this big longitudinal study over time, but I have been able to go out there and do this kind of one point in time research on some of the families relative to kinship care. So what I'm finding with the families that I am working with, again, I'm not following the same family over time, but I am working with families here and there whenever I am able to. So I've been doing this work for about 7 years. And what I'm finding is that these families are able to survive the complexities that are involved in their daily lives. So we all have struggles, we all have challenges, but oftentimes in kinship care families, especially because of the roles that different people are now playing, so the grandparent isn't playing this traditional grandparent role, the grandparent is now acting as the parent, but that grandparent is not the parent, right? Sometimes the biological parents are still in the picture at some level. So the roles oftentimes are confused and the situations are complex. So I am really studying what these complexities are all about and how these families really survive through the complexities. And just one more thing about the kinship caregiving work is, again, I follow grounded theory, and specifically classic grounded theory. And when you begin to start analyzing data from grounded theory research, you really need support and a team of people to really do the work with you. So I would say for the last 6 or 7 years, I've had a wonderful mentor who really got me started on the classic grounded theory path. And she has now become my research partner, and she actually is out in California. So we meet, we used to meet weekly, then maybe twice a month. Now we talk on the phone at least once a month, and we're involved in all kinds of other projects together as well. But what she does now is support my analysis of my kinship care data, because she has really been with me through the start of that work too. So she really is a validity check for me. So as I am coming up with themes and coming up with my theories and my frameworks, she really helps me to process what I'm coming up with, and really helps me to stay grounded in the data, right? So as a grounded theorist, you have to really stay with your data and not go external to what you think may be happening in these families, or even what the literature may tell you what's happening in these families. You can bring the literature in at a certain point in grounded theory, but you have to be really careful to develop your theory around what's going on in the data. So if you're interested in learning more about grounded theory, I love talking about it, and kinship care as well. So you can always be in touch with me, and I'm happy to share more about that project. So just a little bit now about the project behind me. And I don't mean to be looking kind of away from the camera here, but the PowerPoint is also right in front of me. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this project, which is examining the effects of a person-centered situation-specific music intervention. I'm not going to go through every slide. I'm just going to briefly go through it. But as you can see, we have Dr. Ihara, Dr. Matto, Dr. Inouye, and I think that's all the faculty at Mason, and then we have several students that are a part of this research as well, which is very exciting for me. I love working in a research team, so I appreciate everybody's support and enthusiasm and interest around this project. So before I get started, I just want to tell you a little bit of background on this study. So we became very interested in this national program. It's called Music and Memory Program. You can Google it and learn all about it. This particular program started by a social worker. His name is Dan Cohen. So he has an MSW, but he has spent most of his career doing IT, like doing computer-based work. But he then, I don't know how long ago, a few years ago, started going into nursing homes and, saw some of the conditions there, saw some of the behavior among the residents there, no affect, sometimes challenging behavior that he felt could have been controlled a little differently maybe. I'm not exactly sure what inspired him, but he started this Music and Memory project where what he is doing is trying to get personalized music on iPods for residents in nursing homes across the country. So what we are trying to do as a research team is really study whether or not the music that residents in nursing homes are listening to. So we're interested in residents who have dementia, and really folks who have dementia at the middle to late stages. So we're interested in really studying the effects of this Music and Memory Program and learning, is it really the music that the folks are listening to that is affecting their behavior? And if it is, how long does that change in behavior last, right? So how long does the music really affect their mood? Staying at a point where the caregivers are have an easier time working with the folks with dementia, and really, how is it that the music is able to, change behavior? So sometimes with folks who have a hard time articulating words, as they're listening to their favorite music, they are able to find those words, for a certain period of time. Folks who, are kind of sitting with their head down and have little or no affect, little or no reaction. Sometimes while they're listening to their favorite music from the past or their favorite music currently, they suddenly react and have a different affect. So we are currently, we recently have received a grant, like I was telling you before, so that's that external funding, which is enabling us to work with 5 different adult day healthcare centers in Fairfax County. So we are, this funding started July 1st. So we are now just in the beginning stages of getting the adult daycare centers on board with us, finding the participants to work with, and really examining how this music is affecting behavior. Prior to us receiving the funding from the Virginia Center on Aging, we have done some pilot work with an adult day healthcare center in Fairfax called Insight Memory Care. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of that work. So again, what our objective is to disseminate our preliminary findings of this personalized music intervention program at an adult day health program for people with dementia. So we really want to let other folks know what we're finding and how this music intervention affects behavior with people who have dementia. So there are a wide range of studies out there that really have shown that music and a lot of different arts, so drawing and painting, but particularly for our work, for our question, it's music. So there's a lot of studies out there that do say that music can change behavior, can affect mood of people with dementia. So we are taking that literature, learning from that literature, and then formulating our question, our research question, which is, does this personalized music, the music that a person with dementia has liked in the past, does it affect his or her behavior in a nursing home, in an adult daycare center, whatever the case may be? Okay, so again, for this work, we did our pilot work at Insight Memory Care Center, and it's really the only dementia-specific adult day center in the Washington, D.C. area. So everybody at this adult day healthcare center has a diagnosis of dementia. So it's the only one that is dementia-specific. So then you can see from the slides, they have different programs with a different number of people in each program at their center. And then, so what we were trying to figure out is, when is it at this center when a great number of people or several people, many people at the center have challenging behavior, that if they were listening to their favorite music on the iPod, that behavior would change enough where the caregivers at the adult day healthcare center, the caregivers at Insight Memory Care, would have an easier time. So the staff at Insight told us that this time between 3 and 5 p.m. in the afternoon, as people are starting to leave, is the time that becomes most challenging for them. So what happens with folks that have dementia is when they, for example, if they see other people starting to go home, they may become anxious because they're not going home. Like, are they going to ever get to go home? Those kinds of thoughts may be occurring for them. So that time frame was the time that the staff at the Insight Memory Care told us that was most difficult for them. So before I move on, and I'm just going to maybe go through a couple more slides, but I want to explain, so on that third bullet on the slide behind me, you see control group participants. So in this study, even though we're collecting a lot of qualitative data, we set up the methodology where we have a control group and an intervention group, and you often see this primarily in quantitative studies. So we are doing here what you might call a mixed method study. So we have a control group where we are looking at the behavior. So from this 3 to 5 o'clock time at Insight, we went out there. So we went out there every day for 8 weeks and observed folks for this 2-hour time period. So we had a certain number of people in our intervention group, a certain number of people who would listen to the iPods with their favorite music on there during 3 to 5. But there was also a group of people that we observed who weren't listening to music. So those folks were in our control condition. We're in our control group so that we could see, was it really the music that was making it easier for staff to really transition people home during this 3 to 5 time. So was it really the music that was making a difference? And to answer that question, you oftentimes need to observe a group of people who aren't receiving the intervention, who aren't receiving the music. So that is what we were doing. So I'm going to kind of scroll down. I've explained a little bit about the methodology, a little bit about the sample you can see here. And again, if you are very interested in this topic, in older adults in general, but maybe in this particular project, I'm happy to send you the slides and to talk to you more about it, so just let me know. But let's get to a little bit of the findings. So what we found with people listening to the music is that folks with dementia who are listening to their favorite music oftentimes may engage more, right? They may engage more with us. So during that 3 to 5 time, so that was important, right? So they might not necessarily engage more with us as a researcher, but start talking to the staff more while they're listening to their music, answering questions more because they are being stimulated. We have these themes or these findings of worrying and confusing too, so sometimes, especially before the music's going on, this may be some of the behavior that's being displayed, but also oftentimes the music doesn't stop some of the emotions that are occurring for folks. So maybe they need to listen to it for a longer period of time, or maybe there's some other interventions that are needed as well. So, you know, socializing, and I was talking to you more about this vocalizing and talking. Sometimes when people are listening to the music, their mind is stimulated where they can start to find those words to answer questions. So that's really interesting and exciting for us to see. The music, so sometimes you have people listen to the music if they have this wandering behavior, because it's oftentimes very difficult for staff in long-term care institutions or in adult day health care centers when folks start wandering away, right? So sometimes the music will enable people to calm down and maybe to sit down or to stay in one place. Oftentimes the music also encourages people to move around or to want to dance. So you really have to let people kind of go with the behavior that they're demonstrating, but then really, in terms of the research, really studying, are they moving around because the music is energizing them, or are they wandering because of the dementia and the music really isn't helping to change that behavior? So those are things that as a researcher we really have to spend more time studying and figuring out. Okay, so then we just give examples of how we kind of coded this concept of engaging, and we give just examples of the respondents' behavior that we were studying. So we have this engaging, so I'm going to read this one. So an 81-year-old woman in the late stage program, so she's late stage Alzheimer's disease, listens to her iPod for an average of 33 minutes at a time. So when we went in and worked with her, she would listen to the music on average for about 33 minutes. She is nonverbal, but when she listens to the music, she sometimes answers staff's questions clearly and loudly. She moves her body forward and back as she listens to the music, so she's kind of swaying back and forth like this, and at times moves her hands up and down in rhythm to the music. Her husband told one of the researchers that she used to sing all the time but doesn't anymore. However, it is clear that the music triggers some positive reactions. So as a part of our music and memory work, we also interview the caregivers and ask them about behavior that their loved ones may exhibit at home, and if they have seen any difference once the folks return home from an adult day health center after listening to the music. So we're still trying to explore that data. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for listening to me. And again, if you have any questions or if you're interested in working with older adults or studying older adults or joining us on any of our projects that we have going on in the department, just let me know and I'm happy to talk with you. Thanks so much.